Well, it is great to be here together talking through a really interesting project in the context of family enterprise. When you think of the work that we do at the Koch Center in family enterprise, it's everything from family business, like, for example, enterprise, family office, and the investments that come out of family, and also family philanthropy. And the project that we're going to be talking about today is really an exciting case competition, Olin's first public case competition for a series of years. That's really centrally tied towards values and data from the owner's box. And we have an opportunity to hear a bit from the ownership box here, the leadership team here, about St. Louis City soccer and the work that's happening at the soccer club here for MLS. So I am joined by three members of that group, and I'll have them maybe just do a quick introduction. So Carolyn, if you don't just mind starting this off, and then we'll go Lee and Jason shortly afterwards.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Carolyn Kindle, CEO of St. Louis City SC.
Great. Lee?
My name is Lee Broughton, and I am the Chief Brand Architect of St. Louis City SC.
Hi, Peter. Thanks so much for having us. Jason Tyne, Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel for St. Louis City SC.
Great. And as you'll see here shortly, this is a part of a broader project, a broad case competition that is going to be happening across the country for teams, MBA teams, undergrad teams, graduate teams, to be able to submit their thoughts around what a family, an ownership group, and a club can do to balance purpose and performance moving forward. So I want to start, Carolyn, with you, and in particular to wrestle with what success looks like. So again, I can imagine success could be determined by performance in the field. It could be determined by a particular investment, so the investment returns of the actual venture itself. It could even be assessed by what you're attempting to do in terms of civic pride and the development of downtown West. But when you think about what success looks like for the family and for the club itself, how would you define that?
Well, I think we need to continue to grow the awareness in the sport and really the knowledge of the sport here in St. Louis. But, if you think about it, we've had an amazing first couple of years. We've broken records. And so what we need to do is to continue to maintain that pace and continue to bring people into, I think, the city ecosystem as well as the MLS ecosystem as well. So one of the things I would say about Major League Soccer is that it really needs to be all teams working together to make sure that we're successful and we stay relevant. And so I think, it's easy to have sellout matches, record-setting merch sales, so on and so forth, but we need to find a way to continue that first and foremost. One of the things, though, from just a community perspective is I've always said when there are people in the St. Louis region wearing the names of our players on their kits, then we've done a good job of making sure that our people feel like they have ownership in the players as well. Because early on, the commissioner said to us, one of the true signs of success is when the community feels like they own the team, not the ownership owns the team. So, going down more of the civic pride path, yesterday we launched our first mini pitch. The turnout was amazing, but it was a really proud moment to be able to talk about all of these things that we have been promising that we would do for the city and delivering on them as well. Because you have heard teams come out and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And 2 or 3 years later, there hasn't been any movement. Whereas I feel like this club has really delivered on everything that they've promised. And then, of course, I'd be remiss to not mention a beautiful stadium, training facility, headquarters that we have in downtown West. So it was an area that really had no activity at all. And now, whether non-game day or game day, we're attracting people, we're attracting events. And I think you're starting to see that just bringing that density and bringing that community together is helping really all of downtown. So whether it's Union Station, whether it's some of the small bars and restaurants. And so I think it's really done wonders for getting people out of their local tiny communities and coming out to a bigger stage.
Great. Well, maybe as one follow-up point on this, you've kind of alluded to it a bit already, but what is your view, your working theory, if you will, about how a soccer club can impact a particular region? I would imagine there's certain things that are possible out of that. You've mentioned a few of them in terms of, real estate's changing, valuation, people wanting to go downtown, et cetera. And there might be other things that are actually like beyond what a club alone can actually do. So what's your view of what St. Louis City can actually do as a soccer club when it comes to developing that particular part of the region?
Well, I think first and foremost, you're seeing it happen. Since we've announced the team, you're watching, growth happen, whether it's new hotels, new and small mom and pop bars and restaurants. And so I think that's what that area needed in particular. It helps with tourism. It helps, especially if we plan this correctly with other events downtown. Does that drive revenue at restaurants, but also hotel nights and, people going to other attractions? But it also gives us a great opportunity to showcase what St. Louis has. I mean, if you look at all of the vendors in the stadium, they're, I think, all local food and beverage, certainly adding local artists in the music scene. I think it's really more than just about downtown West, but it's a great way to promote the entire region. And so it's whatever you're searching, whether it is a match or whether it is an elevated culinary experience. I think that's what that whole footprint is really doing.
Great. So, Lee, I'm going to turn it over to you here for a second, and I'm not going to out you too much as being a non-American. I'm going to let your accent do that here shortly. But in particular, I'm curious, as you look across regions, so you've seen soccer and city development in other areas, you've seen St. Louis, you've seen other US cities, both kind of what are the critical regional factors to continue forward momentum? And what do you think is required from the city, from the club, et cetera, to keep that progress moving forward?
Yeah, I think for our region, one of the big proof points that we've been able to really try and be is a part of a narrative that defines what St. Louis stands for, what it's like to live here. And some of that really came out of some insight work that preceded the actual development of the soccer team. And for us, I mean, thinking a little bit about some of the things that Carolyn is alluding to, it has enabled us to get to a psychology that is very positive beyond just the city limits, but as a region, about something that's what it means to be a part of a future here, as opposed to just looking at a history. And so I think that for us, soccer really is about the future. It's a sport that is young in America, even though St. Louis has been playing it for 150 years. There hasn't been a professional team in that way. And I think that it's enabled us to start looking at things like culture in St. Louis. How do we define it? And to Carolyn's point, food, art, music, those things have been folded into the stadium experience. And it's been able to create this platform. Oh, yeah, St. Louis is really good at music. And it's got an incredibly weighted artist population. The food scene is James Beard award winning and is all over the place. So I think it kind of creates this center of gravity that is about the people of St. Louis. And I think that that's the thing that we are really trying to use through the brand, but also through the stories of what it's like to be here in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's interesting. Please go ahead, Carolyn.
Can I add one thing to that? And I think Lee sort of hit on it, but I think we need to talk about how Pillars of the Valley has been so important for the project and what we're doing, because that was something that this ownership group from the very beginning was very thoughtful of how do you pay homage to the land that the stadium was on, because it once was a thriving community. And I think Lee's spot on when he says that that's also helping the community, because we're educating them on a piece of history that has been forgotten. And so I think that it is our duty as a professional sports team that does bring hundreds of thousands of people to make sure that we incorporate that history into the future.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So let me see if I can play this back to you all, right? So imagine the way that people in St. Louis historically talk about St. Louis. They'll reference the World's Fair. They'll reference, the Olympics. They'll talk about something 100 years ago. that is kind of an idealized version of what that looks like, right? If you dig into the Forest Park role of the World's Fair and the like, there's some kind of complicated history there as well. So we tell this piece that's rooted in the past and a little bit whitewashed along the way, and we don't tell enough stories about the future. And so what I'm hearing here in both of these comments is one piece, we actually want to be rooted in a history that has maybe an inclusive grasp of some of the complexity. So when we do talk about the past, we should fold in some of the complexity there.
Well,
and then there should also be a forward-looking.
Yeah, complexity is for a reason of repair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So this combination of complexity and repair, and then also this kind of forward tilting momentum of feeling a certain kind of excitement about what this community is and what it could be, in ways that you see in cities like Detroit. They've kind of owned a certain kind of narrative that makes people feel excited about downtown Detroit's development, amongst other things. So it's the role of brand and story in driving both of those pieces. Is that a fair capture from the two of you?
Yep.
That's great. So Jason, I want to transition over to you here for a second. And in particular, I want to talk about urban development, something I know that you've been thinking about a lot. We've been reading a shared book about it right now as well. So one of the things that seems critical in urban development is not an initiative in isolation, but a cluster of initiatives. So for example, it could be not one company locates to downtown, but a company and a hotel and a park and a civic asset and amongst these other things. The idea that oftentimes it's a cluster of developments that make something interesting or cool and a place to be. So as you think about the role of cluster development and the role of this particular project in spurring or relating to other pieces, what comes to mind for you as being the important pieces of the past, as well as the important pieces moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so when you talk about cluster development in particular in downtown West, obviously with the National Geospatial Agency just north, half mile north, that's a tremendous opportunity that St. Louis has to really capitalize on. It's a generational opportunity. And so if you think about a stadium and a soccer team, it is an amenity that many employees, and the soccer demographic is exactly the demographic of employees at maybe technology companies that gravitate towards geospatial. And so the federal government has plopped this opportunity on our lap. We have a neighborhood around a stadium that would be phenomenal as a urban, dense, livable, walkable community. We have some area geography nearby where we can start to develop that cluster and have some things, an accelerator, some things along those lines that focus on geospatial. And some of that's happening already. If you look at the Globe building and it has skiffs in it, the beauty of some of this geospatial work, if it's going to be done in conjunction with the federal government, is you have to have a skiff, and you can't do that from home. And so you have to have that physical presence. And so you start to build that cluster. You have the place where people can live. You have amenities like soccer, which generates hopefully retail and food and beverage, and then you start generating jobs, and hopefully that kind of bleeds into the central business district as well, which already has some of this, but didn't kind of get that turned around as well.
That's great. So Leah, I want to circle back to you here quickly as well, and I want to think about this role of brand development and story. And in particular, how that can play a role in this broader development. So what I'm hearing from you and have read from you in the past is this is not merely about increasing loyalty to the club itself, but rather the brand's acceleration bleeds into civic pride, civic engagement, excitement about the future of St. Louis, et cetera. I wonder if you can speak to maybe whether there's been models you've looked to that have informed that strategy, or at the very least, particular tactics that have been an important part of that type of brand strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've actually created in many ways a product brand business model, because for 3 years of the 4 years that Carolyn mentioned that we've been operating underneath a franchise, we didn't have a soccer team at all. So we had to sit down really quite quickly and think, how do we want to organize for ourselves? Because we were going to have to be talking about something in an incredibly influential way without anybody being able to see it for 3 years. So that meant that we've become incredibly brand centered. So if you were to think football is a product that we make and sell, we've kind of organized around that. So it's very consumer orientated. So that's a model that we've looked at very carefully. I think we were very lofty in the influence that we wanted to have. And if you think about how some of the tech companies have those transformational ideas around, purpose, ours was to be an exceptional club and neighbor. And it really has meant that we've sort of been community led in everything that we've done. We've gone out, sought insights, and then taken those insights on board, and then started to find, how do we reach out to segments of the population to make sure that we keep our ear close to the ground and not just use the instincts that we might have as good marketers when the audience isn't really interested. That sort of helped us build certain things. We've obviously looked at Europe. A lot of the way that we think about our fans is very similar to some of the Premier League clubs. We've even hired somebody that is a part of our team. He was already over here. It was somebody that we knew tangentially. Other things like technology, we've looked at how restaurants went digital and made sure that that's something that we've embedded into our mobile app, so that it's a function as well as a form and a service of information. It actually plays a role in having you get food in the stadium. So we've definitely looked at certain models, and the idea is that as a sports team, we wanted to be the first of the new, not last of the old. And that's something that we've thought very carefully about. A lot of our business team didn't come from sport at all. They all came from the consumer world. So I think there are definitely things that we've borrowed and with an attempt to look at the brand as something that can really accelerate that psychology to think of us differently. And maybe one other point, one of the things that the three of us were particularly conscious of is we had no legacy, and we had to quickly build something that felt robust, even though there was something in the future coming that would start looking at what legacy began to look like. And that had a big influence on us as well.
And in particular, what was it that you did to either get around that lack of legacy or to build it from the history of St. Louis soccer?
So I think one of the very intentional things we did was to ensure that we were acknowledging and inclusive of the history of soccer here, but we did it through language about our future. So we wanted to be very intentional about seeing St. Louis City SC as a proof point of what St. Louis can be, even though the sport, and there is a wonderful sort of vibrant fandom that has been based in a lot of history. They are a big part of what this club's about, but it's also something for people that didn't even know that soccer was here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Carolyn, I'm going to target this next question towards you, but I'd actually like to have the three of you weigh in on this afterwards, because I think this will be interesting to hear how you think of this differently. But there's a lot of interesting momentum happening in soccer right now. So, for example, at the start of this project, there was already obviously knowledge of the World Cup coming. There was already knowledge of the Apple TV deal. So that was known. But then in July, you had one of the world's greatest players sign with Miami. That changes the calculus a bit. You also have kind of soccer momentum more broadly. So you have major players signing in Saudi Arabia for hundreds of millions of dollars in the last week or so. So some interesting momentum happening both at the US level in terms of, again, World Cup, Apple TV, and global level, fragmenting of not just all the top talent hovering in Europe, but moving into different areas. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is possible from the club standpoint or the league standpoint that actually captures and builds upon that momentum? And then secondarily, what are the challenges of that that set of things that are happening?
Yeah, I think one thing in particular that I think we're really proud of is our City Futures program, and really making sure that we're offering the ability of people from all over to have at least exposure to soccer, with the hope that we're able to sort of not only backfill our own academy and our own teams, but potentially have the next Messi coming from St. Louis. And so I think that there is a lot of opportunity in making sure you have strong youth programs, or, the next Josh Sargent. I mean, the talent in the St. Louis region, especially in the sport of soccer, is incredible. So I think that that's one thing that we really, as a club, need to continue to focus on. I think as a league, I think there needs to be a little bit more of an agreement on how we should really treat the fan experience, including the quality of play on the pitch, because I think that rightfully so, there is some differences of opinions on both. And I think that kind of going back to everybody needs to be operating out of the same playbook, I think will make the league much stronger all around, because you can see that sort of the newer teams, St. Louis included, have made an investment in their stadiums. They've made an investment in their players and their coaching staff. And I think that needs to be a little bit more consistent, so that if you are in Iowa, for instance, you're watching not only your favorite team, but maybe you're watching other teams as well. I think, with some of the excitement that was announced in July, I mean, you can certainly say what amazing, here's this world-class player that chooses to come to Major League Soccer, MLS. I mean, that's a huge win, right? And it's brought a lot of attention, and it certainly brought more people into the ecosystem. But I think that just as City will have to do going forward, the entire league will have to do going forward. And what do you do after Messi? What do you do after the World Cup? And Jason, I'm going to let Jason answer this, but I'm in complete agreement with him. So I'm going to tee him up and kick the ball to him on
Look at that beautiful Messi-like pass to your team across the pitch.
That's a handoff right there.
Perfect.
Just for the toughest question in the entire interview. Go ahead, Jason. How are we going to address this?
Yeah, Carolyn is 100% right in that right now, obviously soccer, football is the biggest sport in the world, bar none, right? But the United States is the largest economy, the largest market, and it is largely untapped. Even though it's a multi-billion-dollar sport, many of those dollars are going over for the EPL rights and things like that. But what we have right now in the United States is a tremendous opportunity. Right now, we have Messi for 2.5 years. That's already doubled the number of Apple subscribers, 250,000 subscribers in Mexico. It is obviously increasing the international reach for Major League Soccer. As a club, we can and should find ways to use that. We have many international players to use Apple as the way to reach those new markets. But in addition to Messi, in 2024, we have Copa America in the US, which is a CONMEBOL South American tournament that's going to be played in the US. So that'll bring Brazil, Argentina, big teams like that. In 2025, Club World Cup, which are professional teams playing a World Cup style tournament. So you will have an Arsenal or whoever in the United States playing against other teams from around the world. And then, of course, 2026, you have the World Cup. So there are literally millions of soccer fans, casual soccer fans, entering the top of the funnel. And the trick for us, as Carolyn mentioned, is going to be converting them to Major League Soccer fans. And then from our perspective, City fans. Because for the long-term success and sustainability of the league, especially if we're going to start going after people like Messi or Mbappe has been rumored, or Neymar has been rumored, we need somebody sitting in Peoria watching Orlando play Portland, just like they will watching Seattle play the Dolphins. And that's where we need to get to from a economic viability perspective, and to make football a dominant sport in the US. But that brings in the international spotlight on St. Louis, but also to the entire sport in the country.
So Lee, before we get to you on your response here about the challenges and opportunities, Jason, one of the things that this reminded me of was a conversation that we had previously about Pele coming to the US in the 1970s, and at least some direct, maybe not causal relationship, but direct impact on the financial strain and stress on teams. So again, you could imagine a corollary case here, which is saying we should go after high value players and put them on our books. But if your top team is somewhere in the $100 million revenue space, maybe a little bit higher than that, it's hard to imagine getting a $200 million player on your books to be able to make that work. Is that a bit of the financial model? You have to have the top line grow to be able to afford those types of players?
Well, a couple of things. One, yes, the top line has to grow. That will trail because there are many contracts in place that are multi-year contracts. That means that ownership groups of the various teams need to invest. And as Carolyn mentioned, this ownership group and many other newer ownership groups are willing to make investments. Messi is an extreme sort of investment that you might argue is not everybody would be willing to do that. Not to mention that it took more than just that ownership group's investment to make that happen. And so that's going to be difficult to kind of pull that one off. But for the long term, there has to be that change of investment, no question. But maybe part of the trick is to keep the fans after Messi is gone. They have to think that the quality of product has increased along with his tenure in Major League Soccer. And that doesn't necessarily require a 50 million or whatever investment was for Messi, but it may require some investment, maybe more modest, but deeper into the roster. And that may be a great thing that comes out of this.
Lee, what about for you? When you think about what of these things that Jason just mentioned a bit ago that excites you and says, this is a branding dream, I can build upon this. And what are some of the other ones that are more challenging or things that you worry about when it comes to building upon this momentum?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's simply about getting more fans. And the vision that I think is critical to that is that the clubs are able to truly identify themselves in the geographies that they reside. And when you look at the sport in other countries, the football clubs are the identity of where I come from. And, I think that maybe they don't have the same level of competition that America has for, sports fans, where you've got the other 4 big leagues as well. But I do think that there is an opportunity for the MLS to have a vision that it helps the clubs create so that they are completely anchored in an identity of what it means to be in that city. And then you can start using some of these accelerators or stimulants, such as a Messi or such as a, perhaps even a salary cap model change or however one decides to tweak it. And it becomes something that is rooted in the tribalism that will get the fans to start supporting and looking for the team when it goes away. And then the rivalries start happening, and you start seeing to Carolyn's point, the Iowa is interested in the tug of war between Chicago and St. Louis, or between Kansas and St. Louis, because there's a grist there. And some of the other sports have that, and it's in part because there's so much more history there. But if we can use this time to really encourage the link to an identity of a Chicago or of a Boston or of a St. Louis, and build that fan base locally, that's the thing that gets, I think, separates soccer a little bit from some of the other sports, because some of the other sports are maybe about individual players or maybe some of them have changed so many times that they've recruited all sorts of different things. That is one thing that can be unique to soccer.
You know, just to back up what Lee was just saying, what's amazing to me is we're 2/3 through the way the first year, and this is already happening. If you've been to a game and you've seen a goal score and you hear the crowd chant STL, that is tribalism right there. Everybody, doesn't matter what the person next to you looks like, where they come from, what their job is, we're all chanting STL together. And that's the beginning of that tribalism that Lee is alluding to, and we're trying to ingrain soccer, city, and region.
That's great. So Jason, I want to do one question to you, and then we're going to do a round the horn finish around the group here. So there's been a lot of success stories, Jason, when it comes to kind of the club operations. And now I want you to put on your hat of the next year and the challenges. So in other words, when you think of the things that are going to require further attention as you move beyond year one into season 2, season 3, season 4, what are some of the things that come to mind for you there? Many of them could be hit on already, but again, what's top of mind for you? What keeps you awake at nights when it comes to operational challenges?
Yeah, I mean, are you referring to like in the stadium challenges? I mean, you know, from an operations perspective, people would love to have the problems we have, but you know, we have things that we can't solve, like crowded concourses. We have things that we can solve, like ice machines that don't produce enough ice. You know, one of the great things that we have as a club have inherited from the Taylor family and enterprise is a maniacal sense of fan experience, customer service. And so we're always through that lens looking at ways to improve. And so even things like the food story that we have with the 25 local food partners, you know, we want to, from an operational perspective, how do we make that better? And does that, you know, maybe there's natural turnover, but that's bringing fresh restaurants in, or even changing the operation of the restaurants and changing the menus to keep that turning over. I mean, these are like things that we are lucky to have as problems. You know, enhancing some of the cell phone connectivity as we work through a DAS system. But these are not horrible problems, and these are easy problems to fix. After the first season, we've already started the process of sitting down, assessing what needs to be changed, what can be changed, where we're limited. And there will be some things here and there that'll, again, improve the fan experience, which has I don't want to brag here, but a 93 net promoter score, which I'm told is pretty good.
Much higher than your previous law firm, I think, in terms of net promoter score. Not just that firm, just law firms in general, I'm assuming.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Peter.
So great firm, by the way. But what I want to close with here at this point is a bit of a round robin, round the horn sort of approach that's really essentially tied towards this case competition. So over the course of the fall and into the winter, you're going to have undergraduate and graduate teams from WashU and really all over the country wrestling with this question of how does the ownership group balance purpose and performance beyond year one? So if you were to name one thing that's top of mind for you that you'd love to have that collective intelligence wrestling through, what comes to mind for you? Carolyn, why don't you you kick it off on this one?
I think I'm going to go down the purpose route. You know, when you're trying so hard to be a good community leader, it's very important to try to make sure that not only you're part of the community, but you're addressing community issues. But one sort of, I think, fine line we kind of have to walk is to make sure that we're addressing issues and not kind of getting into more social issues, because I'm just not sure that a sports team necessarily needs to take a strong position in certain arenas. And so I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is or at least I should say that I want to keep top of mind, is continuing to expand on that community partnership, but doing it in a way that's ethical, responsible, and really has a larger impact. And just making sure that we really truly are continuing to improve this region and get back and really help St. Louis get back on the international map from that perspective, especially.
That's great. Jason, for you, what's something that's top of mind for you that you'd love this swarm of intelligence to be thinking about as they wrestle through this case?
Yeah, and I'm going to cheat and say two things. The first one, I'm going to go down the purpose path. One of our mottos is that we are more than a soccer club. And a year like this, with really unexpected and tremendous success, and really great players and great personalities and fun storylines, it gets easy to kind of get caught up in the soccer side of things. And I want to make sure, how do we make sure we always maintain true to the more than soccer as well? The second part of the question is, how do we, we're fortunate enough to have 22,423 fans every single game go into the stadium, and that's a tremendous fan base. But our fan base is really 3+ million people in the metropolitan area. How do we make all of the fans, whether you go to a game or not, feel just as important and enjoy the engagement and experience just as if you were in the stadium? And I think that if we can reach out to those people, then that's how we get to where Lee was talking about with that broad tribalism.
That's great. And Lee, this is your chance to have 3. You can one up both Carolyn and Jason by offering 3 final thoughts, but I'll let you go 1 if you want as well.
Wow. I mean, I think that in terms of, just to sort of try to say something a little different, because I do echo some of the things that have been said very much. But I think one of the tensions that we would love to have people think about is our ambition is to be a super brand. We believe that City has a relevance globally, and that would enable St. Louis to transcend in a way that Manchester, England has transcended. And I remember a day when Manchester wasn't a transcendent town. And I think that the things that we've done around linking ourselves to culture and to think about ourselves as a technology forward brand, they've begun to build some rungs on a ladder towards that goal. And then the inaugural season and the performance with the purpose has really helped us gain some national and to some degree international story. Carolyn's done an incredible job of representing a female-led ownership group. We need to keep looking at that ambition and understanding what it means for City, both in terms of our purpose and in terms of our performance, so that we can continue to be developing a super brand status. Not dissimilar to, say, something like the Packers, where you might argue that it would be kind of incredible that such a small town can have such a gigantic. I mean, if you're in Germany and you grow up in Germany, when you look at the NFL, the only team you think about are the Packers. And I don't know why that is, but it's just one of those things that has resonated outside of anything to do with that geography. And I think that's something that we really want to achieve too.
That's great. Well, Carolyn, Jason, Lee, this has been a great conversation. We appreciate at WashU the opportunity to partner alongside you to bring some students into conversation with these questions about how to balance purpose and performance in a group like St. Louis City SC. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.